Okay. Well, I think there was like two people who left. I think we can just get started. I'll just start with the basics. Yeah, I just wanted to mention this is being recorded. If you join the Q&A audio at the end, you'll be recorded and it'll likely be shared publicly, because a lot of people wanted to join. I mean, a lot of people wanted to hear about what we actually talked about. So we'll be sharing this afterwards. Um, this is the first time we do the office hours. Of course, there were some technical issues. But if people enjoy the information, I know we're not getting a huge turnout with the number of people joining, but if people enjoy the information, we might do them occasionally. Um, we also might uh, pick a better time, if this time doesn't work for the people who want to attend. Um, oh yeah, by publicly I mean uh, maybe an unlisted YouTube video or something, just because that might be the best way to share it. Um, but yeah, if you'd prefer not to be in a video that stays around for a bit, I would recommend just using chat. Um, Okay, so this office hours is it's a little bit technical. There are some pretty technical things we get into, but definitely stay around for the end because there are some other less technical things towards the end too. Okay, first I wanted to talk about some new topics. As many of you know, we added a hate crimes protection topic to Equaldex. This has came up quite a while ago, and we finally got around to finalizing it. And I think we have almost 60 countries covered. Uh, so the team has been doing a really great job at filling it out. But if you know of any countries that you're familiar with, feel free to check it out and add that the new topic to those countries because we want to start filling it out since this is a pretty important topic. Um, we have also a ton of proposed new topics, things like transgender bathroom bills, artificial insemination, transports bans. All of these are pretty easy to add. It takes maybe like 20 minutes to add a new topic to the site. The problem is just getting people to uh, finalize the actual structure of the of the topic and what the statuses are and weights and stuff. So if there's a topic you're interested in, feel free to kind of like spearhead it yourself and try to plan it out and get people's opinions and move the discussion along because we're a pretty small team, so it's we have some of these topics that have been around for like a year and we just haven't finalized anything. Um, on that topic, we have a request template for new topics. Um, so if you have a new topic you want to see added to the site, just fill this out. It's available in the request channel. Um, which four do I think would be best to add? Um, Honestly, I think they're all pretty good. I think they're all legitimate topics that should be added. I think we can add them all, honestly. I think there are some that I think are maybe further along than others. Like I think the bathroom bills was pretty, I think pretty far along. Um, but yeah, let's talk them through. I mean, there's 231 comments on one of them, but I think we can try to finalize it. Okay, so a couple of other updates on partners and research. So we have a new travel partner called Byway. This is a travel agency in London. Equaldex has a bunch of travel partners. A lot of travel agencies want to offer information for travelers, especially LGBTQ travelers who need to be more cautious about where they're traveling. So it's great to see that they're using Equaldex's information. Um, as I posted in the announcements channel. We also had another pretty cool update that the European Union, the Agency for Asylum, they do country reports, and they've been using Equaldex's data in their country reports, both like the equality index and sometimes like the laws and everything. So it's really cool to see uh, us get recognition from, the European Union. We also, got recognized by other governments and non-governments like the UN, like the U.S. State Department, the UK government. So I think it it's really cool to see that the work we do is getting recognized by some big organizations and governments. Um, Another really small thing is we added a research and studies section to the about page, or the press and partners page. This just kind of highlights some studies that Equaldex has been included on. These aren't like officially like involved. Like we Equaldex wasn't involved with them. They just used Equaldex's data. But there's some really interesting studies, especially things that are pretty further from the work that we do. I mean things like religion and healthcare and MPOX and stuff. Like science. It's cool to see how they're using our data to kind of uh, you know, study other aspects of research. Okay, now into the main topic, the equality index issues. Before we begin, I wanted to just start with a reminder about what the equality index is. It's an average of two indexes, the legal index and the public opinion index. The legal index is basically uh, all of the laws in a country, and they're all on a weighting and scoring system. So if a country has legalized every single law related to LGBT rights, they would get 100. If they've gone in the complete opposite direction, they would get a 0. Then the public opinion index is basically all of the public opinion surveys that we have, an average of kind of the answers that the public has responded to in those surveys. And then the equality index is just an average of those two scores. So today I wanted to talk about the public opinion index and some of the bias issues that we've been running into. This has come up on like social media. Sometimes we've had people kind of point out some weird things of specific countries or kind of question Equaldex's public opinion scoring. Um, and I've been thinking about this for a while, and I wanted to kind of share the way I'm kind of thinking of solving this problem, and get some opinions on it. So the first issue, when we add a lot of surveys about a specific topic, such as acceptance of transgender rights, in a region, it causes a strong bias towards those topics. Um, so uh, not just transgender rights, it could be anything. It could be same-sex marriage, adoption. Maybe we add a country is like legalizing same-sex marriage, so there's a ton of data about same-sex marriage. There are a lot of organizations polling that data. Then we add all those studies, and it really like biases the the public opinion data to same-sex marriage or to transgender rights, because we're adding so much data. Um, Number two, when regions survey more progressive, I'm going to say quote unquote progressive or advanced topics such as transgender people in sports, those are things that more progressive countries are talking about. Um, but those are less widely accepted topics. So basically, the progressive countries are getting penalized for having polling data on progressive topics like transgender people in sports and stuff like that, because those topics are widely or less widely accepted, and they always score lower than things like same-sex marriage and homosexuality. and other topics. And then number three, I'm talking about the problems first. Number three, most countries, especially the conservative ones, on the flip side, don't have data on uh, topics related to gender identity and expression, and that leads to incorrectly higher scores for those countries. So basically, conservative countries, because they're not polling more progressive issues, they actually kind of get a boost in the score, whereas the ones that are asking these quote unquote harder questions or less accepted questions, they get lower scores. So it's kind of like progressive countries are being penalized. Um, okay, so that's the issue. And to visualize it a bit more, so I'm kind of bucketing these into very simple terms and simple numbers just to kind of illustrate it. So basically, progressive countries on the top you see, imagine that the surveys related to transgender topics are around, like score around maybe 50% acceptance. And then the surveys about LGB topics like same-sex marriage and public acceptance of homosexuality score much higher. Just imagine a country like that, it would average out to about 70% because it's taking an average of those surveys. But maybe a less progressive country where their surveys around LGBT topics are lower, they actually could score the same because they don't have data on transgender topics. Um, so basically, two countries could have a similar score even though one is obviously more progressed in terms of opinion. It's just the less progressive countries aren't getting a full picture. So the solution is a two-part solution that I wanted to talk about. This isn't a finalized solution. This is just, I think, probably the direction that makes sense. So this comes in two parts. So part one um, is to split the topics into equally weighted categories. When I looked at Equaldex's data on public opinion data, I ran through maybe 124 uh, of the larger surveys. I think it was the multi-region surveys. And I kind of categorized them by question and then categorized them by basically these three categories. And we had about 50 that were basic acceptance, 50 that were same-sex relationship, and then 24 that were about gender identity and expression. So I kind of felt that this kind of grouping made sense in terms of getting like a kind of more rounded picture because there are a lot of surveys about same-sex marriage. There are a lot of surveys about basic acceptance of LGBT people in general and homosexuality in general. And then we have another category of gender identity slash expression, transgender rights, bathroom bills and stuff like that, surgery and stuff like that. Um, so the idea is to kind of put these into three categories. Um, and then the weighting system would look something like this. So, and again, this is just public opinion. This isn't legal at all. So there would be three equally weighted categories. So uh, imagine that gender identity and expression got 70, around a 70% acceptance, same-sex marriage got 80, and then basic acceptance got 90, which is kind of roughly a typical, maybe a realistic kind of scenario. And then you would take the average of those three scores, and it would average out at maybe around 80 or something, just to throw out some fake numbers there. So the idea is that even if we were to add, 200 studies about same-sex marriage, and then, a couple about gender identity and expression, the same-sex marriage wouldn't outweigh the gender identity. They would all kind of be balanced. And I thought a lot about the categories. I think these three categories makes sense without overcomplicating it. Um, so that leads into the next problem, which is many countries don't have public opinion data on gender identity and expression. Um, so the solution that I was thinking of, this one is maybe less obvious, is to kind of temporarily estimate missing public opinion data. And this is a like an actual statistical technique that indices and other researchers use when they don't have data on a specific topic. Um, so the way that I imagine this is going to get a little bit complicated, but let me explain. So imagine you have country A, which only has data on same-sex relationships and basic acceptance, which is a pretty big majority of countries that we have. But they don't have any data on gender identity and expression. So the the weighting or the score for that country would be very biased because it wouldn't have any gender identity topics included. So the way we could fix this issue temporarily until we find the data is to find similar countries that have similar levels of acceptance. So you would look at countries that have same-sex relationships and basic acceptance at like similar levels, and then also look at the country's laws. So maybe all of these countries have legalized the right to change legal gender and gender markers, or they've maybe it's illegal in a certain scenario. But basically, to look at the public opinion data and to look at the legal data on that topic, um, and then basically infer what the gender identity and expression score might be for that country. Um, so for example, country B and country C, and I don't know how many there would be. Maybe there'd be like 5 matching ones, and you could use more data, or maybe there'd just be 2. I don't have I haven't finalized exactly how it could work. Um, so basically, you would assign it a temporary score. Imagine it's 68 and 70, so you would average it to about 69. And I just want to point out that this is not going to be a publicly seen value. Like we wouldn't say 69% support because that is not, we don't know that for sure. But the idea is that this would be uh, a hidden number on the back end that helps more fairly weight the country or for more fairly score the country. Um, it isn't perfect, but I think it's the best route to more fairly uh, score the country. Whereas if we only use the 2 other data points, it would get weighted much higher. Um, so that's kind of the way I was thinking about it. I don't know if it's the perfect example, but I think something like this could work. Um, and feel free to share your thoughts. We'll get into the Q&A at the end because I have a couple more things to cover uh, on this similar topic. So we have another issue with Equaldex's public opinion data. A few people have brought this up. There was a thread about it as well. Basically, we have a lot of survey data that asks the same question and no technical way to group these questions. So this is an example of the United Kingdom's page where we have like 15 surveys, and this data is amazing. Like we have data for several months throughout the year, over the course of a few years, and this data is really great. But the page looks kind of crazy. And there's a bunch of different examples. A couple people shared examples where there's multiple studies and they just don't really get grouped well. Um, and when you come to a page, this is I forget which country's page, but you come to this country's page and you look, oh, this is China. You look at China's public opinion data. This is a lot of data to comprehend. There's 38 surveys, multi-region surveys, and then uh, 11 single region surveys that are specifically about China. And imagine that you wanted to know, like, what do people in China think of same-sex marriage? You would have to really scan through this. You can see that the fourth survey is about same-sex marriage. It's 2021. Then you have to read through all these single regions surveys to find. I'm looking now and I don't see anything on same-sex marriage. So my quick scan of this is 63% support same-sex marriage. That appears to be like it took me a while to figure that out. Um, because there's just so much data. Um, on the topic of so much data, we've had so much data being added over the past couple years. Um, Last year we had 727 surveys. Shout out to Miles for being the number one public opinion submitter. And then we had, quite a few people. Of the top 10 people, that basically that was the majority of the surveys ever submitted to Equaldex. So it's a small number of people, but we have so many surveys and they're not categorized well. The pages are starting to get pretty crazy. So the solution here, which conveniently is also the solution to the equality index issues that I mentioned earlier, is to group surveys by question. Um, so the idea here is that every survey would be grouped into a topic. So um, when, for example, here on the left, there's a bunch of different phrasing of the same question. It's basically, do you support same-sex marriage? So do you agree or disagree with gay marriage? How would you rate your level of support for same-sex marriage? And then I saw one that sounded roughly like 5 years ago, this country legalized gay marriage. Looking back now, do you support, like, was this a good idea? Um, so the idea is we would categorize all of the surveys into a single topic so that they could all be grouped together into one. So all of those would get grouped into the same-sex marriage topic. When I was doing this exercise that I mentioned earlier, where I was trying to categorize all the public opinion data, I first categorized the topics themselves. So when you look at the topics on the left, we had 40 surveys that were just, do you support same-sex relationships, in some version of that phrasing. And then do you approve? And then the second one, do you approve of homosexuals as parents? We had six surveys about that topic. And again, that was just about 124. We have over 1,000 now. So the idea is that we would categorize all of the surveys by a single topic. And basically, is this question essentially asking, do you support same-sex relationships? If it is, it goes into this topic. If it isn't, we put it into its own topic. Once we do this, or sorry, before that, how would this work? So when you're submitting a survey to Equaldex, you would select from a predefined set of questions or topics, basically. You would still fill out all the details that we currently do, but you would tag it under the topic of same-sex marriage. And then if the question or topic doesn't exist yet, there'll be some system for adding it. So either you add it yourself and then a moderator will approve it or accept it or move it. TBD on how exactly that works, but the idea is we'll categorize all 1,000 or so of our topics. And then once we have all this data categorized, we can do some pretty cool things with the data. It would make the data a lot easier to comprehend. This is a super quick mock-up. Don't focus on any of the the way it's designed or the copy or anything. But it's just kind of to summarize how it could look. So you could see like support for same-sex marriage is at 52%, and maybe that would be a summary of or an average of all of the surveys that we have for that topic. Same for same-sex adoption. And then once we have a bunch of surveys, because many countries have multiple questions over the years, we can actually track the progress over time. And this is something that I think is super important because you're looking at some of the data on Equaldex and you can kind of see trends, but you have to really look at like, okay, this one is about same-sex marriage, this one is about this, and it's hard to kind of analyze the data. So the more data we have and the more categorization we have, we'll be able to do some better visualizations. Um, and I think there's some really cool things there. You could also imagine that we might have a support for same-sex marriage that uses all of our surveys that are all under that topic, and we could visualize them on a map. Um, so there's once we have the categories, we could have that a lot better. We could do a lot more visualizations with that. We could roll up all the questions into just one uh, visualization. So to recap, all the surveys will get categorized. This I think we can launch first. Um, I think it's very straightforward that we need to categorize survey data. It's been brought up before, and I think it's very obvious that we'll need to do this. Um, so that's something that we can launch anytime. I actually started working on it already, so that can launch pretty soon. And then we'll have to start going through surveys and categorizing them. I'm not worried about that. Um, and then second, the public opinion index would get weighted into 3 equal categories. Um, Again, I'm not finalized on how this will actually work, but I think there'll be some sort of categorization system where the surveys get rolled up into these, I guess you could call them categories or like pillars of like basic acceptance, same-sex relationships, gender identity, and then those categories get weighted equally so that one is not overpowering the other. And then the third one, which is a little bit more of a question mark, is inferring the missing data on specifically around gender identity and expression, because that's generally the one that is kind of missing from most countries. So the idea is that it would get a temporarily assigned estimated score and as soon as we get uh, data on that country, it would get replaced with the real score, and the uh, the the score would get updated. Um, but that's kind of the thinking. I think step 2 and 3, I think, are further along. Currently, the way the equality index is calculated, it wouldn't support a system like this. I basically have to kind of redefine how the system works and how the system actually processes all of the data and calculates the data because it wouldn't support something this complicated. Um, but I think once we go through the categorization, I think it opens up those ideas where we can have a more equally weighted public opinion um, survey or public opinion score. So yeah, that's it. We can end with a quick Q&A if anyone has any questions about any topics. If you want to join the audio, you can click the raise hand feature. If not, you can just use the text. And again, just remember that it's being recorded, so if you join audio, it'll be recorded. Um, but feel free to ask any questions. I'm just going to review the chat to see if I missed anything. Yeah, Sunny, I like what you said about being open about the estimation. Like, I think on the equality index page, there's like an asterisk on certain scores where it's based on a small number of data. So I think we could add something like that, like a another asterisk or another like little label or something that says we're estimating transgender acceptance in this country based on similar countries with similar laws. Yeah, I think being open about that. I also have thought about potentially making the score rating more public, like a uh, looking at a country, you could click the score and then see how everything was weighted. It gets pretty complicated, especially when you have a bunch of surveys and you would have to show all of those surveys and how they're weighted. Um, but that might be something that could be added for better transparency. I think it's really good to be transparent about how the score is calculated, um, just so that people can poke holes at it. They can, um, criticize anything that we do so that it can be better. Reviewing the chat now. Uh, Miles said, I would like to see if we can split each page into laws and public opinion. Yeah, I think there's definitely I think I mentioned this, but I was working on a version of the region page that had public opinion as like a separate tab. So maybe you land on the page and it shows kind of the high level summary, and maybe even the history, the full history isn't displayed by default. Maybe you expand it or click on it. But I think the public opinion data, there's more we could show, especially when we're adding like charts and stuff, on like a full public opinion data page. Would you ever make a mobile app for Equaldex? Actually, I started on one maybe 10 years ago. Was it 10? It was probably like 10 years ago. Um, and it mobile apps are just a pain to maintain. Like I have another app that I run and it's constantly you basically have to respond to Apple and Google and everything that they require of you, and they'll be like, "Oh, here's a new privacy change. You need to implement this within 6 months or we're going to kick you off the App Store." And their stuff is always changing, so anytime it's not just that easy as like updating a website. It's it's tough. Um, I'd love to. I'd really love to. There's also the possibility of doing a web app that you could put in the possibly in the Google Play Store, or you could have like a download from not a download, like add the app to your home page or your home screen, where it's basically like a web app. It's not like a native app, but you can have like advanced features like push notifications and stuff. Um, so maybe down the line. Good way to get ad revenue from a mobile app. Yeah, that's true. I think adding like a small ad or something to the app, I think would be would be good. Um, Reviewing the chat. Um, Yeah, so the uh, Jade is mentioning potentially categorizing by LGB and T. Um, I thought a little bit about this. I think there is some issues with like uh, splitting them out. Like there aren't like as far as I know there aren't laws that specifically or public opinion. Well, I guess public opinion. Yeah. There probably isn't much data on like specifically on uh bisexual people or gay men or lesbian women. So it might get tough to kind of weight them. And then another issue is there are some topics that kind of apply to everyone. Like same-sex relationships could also apply to trans people. Um, so I don't know if it would make sense to categorize them that way. But if anyone has any thoughts on the categorization, feel free to share it. You can also take a look at the surveys I categorized too. Um, I took I kind of went through it quite a few times to come up with these categories, but uh, I'd love some other opinions on it. I think that'd be amazing. Possible to add, is it possible to add a new section to public opinion data apart from normal data uh, about voting, like voting on laws? Um, like politicians vote, like lawmakers voting on laws. I think that's super interesting. I think some of us talked about this before, and because originally I had added one, and then some people brought up the issue that uh, the lawmakers' votes might not be a good representation of the public opinion because of, yeah, lobbying and, they're voting with the party and maybe it's not, yeah, exactly. Um, but I think it's super interesting. Like that data is also very interesting. Like if you go to a country and see their voting history, I think it gives you not it gives you another lens to look at the country's politics. So that would be interesting to add. Um, maybe not as part of the equality index, but maybe just as information. Um, I do think that uh, the the public's voting, I think is good to add as public opinion. Um, I think we have added that on some countries where like they voted for same-sex marriage. I think that's a pretty good like it gets a lot of people to share their opinion on a topic. So um, yeah, I think that's one thing that we don't. I feel like maybe we don't often like seek out that data. Usually it's like just surveys and stuff, but maybe we can look into because a lot of times they have it broken down by, like you're saying, subregion. So that might be interesting to maybe do like a initiative to look for subregion data, polling or yeah, voting data. Cool. Okay. I think this pretty much wraps it up. Thanks so much for joining. I'll share the recording. I'll figure out how to do it if it's going to be a YouTube or whatever, because I know a handful of people wanted to hear what we're talking about. I think I'll share the slides as well. If anyone has any thoughts on the categorization, please share it. And then at some point soon, we'll start having to categorize the surveys. Um, so I think we can get started on that soon. And I have some ideas on how we might be able to uh, backfill some of our categorizations too. So more on that to come. Okay, thanks everyone.